never lose you in camera.
So my arms will swing around with you.
You can move anywhere you want.
All right. So am I looking at you?
Ignore that.
Right?
Look at me.
Is the sound okay? Or are you checking?
I see bouncing lights.
Brilliant. Or as the Brits say, brilliant.
Indeed, I'm going to give a clap as well.
Amazing.
Sweet. So, I've already done this with a couple of people, but MCM London.
Yeah. Day one.
Day one.
Yeah.
Day one. And this is the last time I was here. Our society was not as big.
Okay.
So they've really
expanded.
They've expanded the space.
Great.
And it wasn't this organised. I'm really lucky the half.
It's kind of nice. Yeah, I got space here. It's kind of unusual at most of the North American shows. It's salmon swimming upstream. It's really intense, you know. And so here, I've got a nice little booth area and got a nice booth neighbor here in Jake, and everyone's been really sweet, so it's good. Hey.
Well, if you are watching this on the 360, you can see Jake.
There you go.
He's there. Or you can, and on the 2D.
Perfect.
Excellent stuff. So, first and foremost, congratulations on
Thank you.
Tripwire Awards.
It was great. That's right. Yeah. So we took I got Best Writer from the Tripwire Awards. I can't believe it. I'm very excited. And Best New Series.
I was saying to Joel, it was one of the awards which was down to the wire, and if you could have done the first Tripwire split winner,
right?
We could have.
It was that close. It was really sweet. The Conan fandom came out in force. I'm really proud of it. So we've it feels really special, and it was a wonderful night.
And the book itself,
the
best series. It's gone great guns.
Thank you.
You were talking in your speech last night as well about that hiatus, and you were basically forced into taking.
Yeah, just I was doing Conan at Marvel, and the world spun off its axis, and it was a surreal time, you know. And then plans changed, and the rights holders for Conan decided they wanted to take a different tack, and the book had wrapped up in Marvel. They partnered up with Titan, and they asked me if I might be interested in pitching on it. I know there were a bunch of other people pitching, and so I honestly went in with every time I get to write Conan, it feels like it's going to be my last shot, so I got to give it everything, you know.
When it comes to Conan, how big a legacy has it been in your own personal reading? We're talking like, because I've spoken to Azzarello, and you say to him about G.I. Joe, and he goes, that's when Azzarello liked certain stuff.
It's fascinating. I grew up on Dungeons & Dragons and Conan and Sword and Sorcery as a whole. Fafhrd the Grey Mouser, and the old D&D novels and Dragonlance and all that stuff. Like Sword and Sorcery is really in my blood. And when I was a kid, I wanted to meet the people who made Conan and D&D and Marvel superheroes. I never thought in a million years I would be one of those people. And so the whole thing feels very strange. People will say to me, they go, "Oh, this must be a bucket list for you." And I go, "No, because I never imagined it was possible." So we're so beyond the bucket now. It's like cosmic. The bucket is a tiny little fraction of a dot on the cosmic horizon. I feel very, very fortunate and very, proud to be part of the legacy of these things in this small way.
Story. Having that, you've got the backing support of the estate as well.
Yeah.
What's been the reception from their side?
The hardcore fans and the original collectors, the estate, and there's literally a group called the Robert E. Howard Foundation, and they're a group of scholars and archivists who want to make sure that people understand the importance of Robert E. Howard as a great American author and the pioneer of a whole genre, and to finally kind of get their nod. And I got the literary award from the Robert E. Howard Foundation this year, and that felt really, really special because they know the original work best, and they're very, very demanding in terms of what they want from the work. And I get it, I want to do right by the fandom. I want to welcome new people in terms of readership.
That's for myself, especially when you are dealing with an extended run.
It's longer. Conan's been around longer.
Is keeping the legacy fans happy, or is it a case of no? I want to get as many bodies.
I don't think you have to. I think you can do both. I think the great thing about a character like Conan, where they're an icon, is that you're not. The reason why the character has a 90-plus year publishing history is because there's something powerful and intrinsic there. Conan's older than Superman, right? And so there's a reason why people keep reading it. There are all kinds of fantasy characters and the lone hero and the whether it's a barbarian or the wanderer kind of character, but very few of them stick like Conan has, and I feel like there's something extra special there. So it's my job to try and never lose that core. That you can tell all sorts of basic generic fantasy stories, but that doesn't make them good Conan stories, right? And there's something about the Hyborian Age and about Howard's themes of savagery versus civilization that make them a little bit deeper and a little more intense, and that the Hyborian Age becomes this really powerful tool to tell those kind of stories. And they're not high fantasy. This isn't dragons and kind of mythic magic in prophecy and magical items. The magic of the Hyborian Age is much more mysterious and strange. That Conan himself,
it's more. I'm not going to say it's more human, but it's more connected to Earth.
Well, it's more connected to humanity instead of just dragons and elves and dwarves and stuff like that. And that stuff's cool, but most of the threats in the Hyborian Age are people, and the movements of people, and the warring kingdoms of people. And the magic is part of it, but it's much more mysterious and strange. And the movements of gods are not to be known. They're mysterious and deadly, and Conan is this weird, he's a character that ends up being the fly in the ointment for these grander things, but he's not the prophecy hero. He becomes a king, but it's by his own hand, not because he is destined to be, And so I feel like there's something much more, the kind of frontiersman Texan that Robert E. Howard was, the self-made man and the kind of frontiersman, that element comes through a lot more in the work, and it speaks to a different kind of a culture that I think the more I do, the more I come to appreciate. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that was going to be my next question. When you got this length of time to work on it, and develop and explore the themes of the world, what has been the biggest surprise from starting and taking on the book?
I think
like going, I didn't really.
Right. Like Conan as a character, of course I knew and I grew up and I liked the Conan books and I liked the comics, but I thought of it in that.
Was it the comics or the books?
I think it was either the comics or the movie. I was young enough that.
Because reading the book, it feels very much like the books.
Well, I came to the Howard stuff later, and really the potency of the prose jumped out at me, and realizing that Roy Thomas wasn't just that narrative style had come from Howard, and so you're like, oh man, I love the Roy Thomas stuff, and then you're like, oh, this is the pure stuff. It's even more bombastic. It's even more poetic and lyrical. I want to plug right into as much of that as I can, and not just I can't copy Howard, but try and get that vocabulary, try and get that cadence as much as I can, and show the beauty in the verbiage. I know that sounds weird, but it's true, especially with the violence and everything else. People, they can have a real surface level appreciation of, oh, Conan is strong and he kicks ass and he's macho, and you're like, yeah, there's testosterone here, and he is a violent character, capable of violence, but there's more to it than that. It wouldn't last if it was just pure machoism. Yeah, there are lots of other characters who are violent and intense, but Conan is surprisingly, there's a depth there. There's a depth there in terms of the character.
Certainly with the first run,
right?
I did feel a lot of that reference to the cadence, the rhythms,
for sure.
And I'm certain that was just reading it. That was absolutely intentional.
Yeah.
Is that something that you have wanted to maintain, or you wanted to get your own?
Well, I think I'm getting more confidence with it. I can't help but tell a story in the way that works for me. I'm not Two Gun Bob, and I'm not Roy Thomas, but I want to celebrate those things that I feel are intrinsic to the character, and then tell a story in a way that means something to me. But part of what makes it meaningful is trying not to go outside the lines of what I feel like the Hyborian Age represents, or what Robert E. Howard was doing. even while we are trying to keep that legacy going. And that was part of it for me, was about not just adapting the original stories again. They've been done beautifully in comics. They've been around for 80, 90 years. So how can you tell stories that use those ingredients and feel like these unearthed old tales? Like we rip this out of the Bronze Age and we bring it into the present, and I can still surprise you. That I can make a cliffhanger and you genuinely don't know what's going to happen next. That's really exciting to me. And the teams that we've got, De La Torre and Braithwaite, absolutely brilliant. None of it would work without them. The art, sells the book. It makes that powerful first impression, and it speaks to an era of adventure that I feel like welcomes back the old collectors and is a hit of nostalgia for people who may not have even, they know that that's how it's supposed to look. Yeah. That we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're taking what works in that foundation and then hopefully building something really strong on top of it.
You're not bouncing off into wild fantasy.
I don't want to make it something that it's not, and that feels really important to me.
That really must be a challenge, especially when you are doing a length
right.
run.
Well, and trying to find ways to use the ingredients but still make a new dish, like that yes, there's beautiful women, and yes, there's exotic places and treasures, but how can I take that and put it in a context you maybe haven't quite seen before? And so one of the first stories I did at Marvel was this story called The Gambler. Conan ends up in this gambling hall where you can bet your life away. And I was talking to Howard Andrew Jones, this amazing fantasy author, and he was telling me what stories he felt like it had notes of. Oh, it's got a little bit of Tower of the Elephant, or it's got elements of that he could see from even the mysterious character, I don't want to spoil it, but that has a bit of Frostrand's daughter. And I said, actually, the story that I pulled from the most was God in the Bowl. And he goes, I don't see that at all. And I go, well, in God in the Bowl, Conan is trapped in a situation where he can't just solve it with his sword, and yet there's going to be an explosion of violence at some moment. How long can we keep the tension?
Sure.
And then when is it going to explode? Hopefully in a way you finally got comfortable and you don't think it's going to happen. Now I pull the trigger on it. And he goes, oh yeah, okay, the pacing now. Yeah. I said, not God in the Bowl as a plot, but God in the Bowl as a pacing exercise. And so that's the trick for me, is trying to find...
A lot of the Conan books were exercises in that as well.
Yeah.
Certainly when he was doing the sequential, the secretarial.
Right. Well, you look at something like Hour of the Dragon, and where it's almost like a best of a bunch of ideas from Conan. And so there's moments where there's surprising amount of character development, and then there's just relentless sort of war and the interplay between those two things. The one thing I haven't done yet is a King Conan story, and that's something that I really want to explore, a different facet of that. And the character has evolved and his attitude has changed, and yet there's intrinsic, unmovable elements that make him who he is. I try and find where those lines are. Yeah.
Just to wrap things up then,
sure.
A couple of questions. Number one, we have been talking, I've been mentioning about a long extended run.
Yeah.
Talked about the Tripwire Awards. Do you have an idea of where you are going?
Yeah, we do have a big mythic
plan. You've got yourself a publication run you're being allowed,
right.
And I can then play in that, or do you have certain things?
No, not only that, we have a grand mythic plan for the series. Every year kind of has its own theme. Okay. The first year was that Black Stone. Second year hasn't been unveiled yet, but the Free Comic Day issue for next year will sort of reveal where we're going with that stuff. And then every year builds up in intensity over this larger plan and some big kind of mythic stuff that we're exploring. And I'm super excited to pay that off. So I've signed on for 3 more years on the book. We know where it's headed. Almost all of it has been charted out, which is cool. The big beats.
Yeah.
And then in between, we get these, not accidents, but happy little discoveries. So like Frozen Faith, which is the current arc that just wrapped up this week with issue 16, that was an idea that came from working with Dougie Braithwaite, he and I chatting, and him saying he really wanted to do a story in the frozen north, and I didn't have a story set in that period or that that exploration period of Conan's life. I thought about some bits, but I wasn't sure. And then him wanting to do it forced me to think deeper about, okay, then what do we do? What can we set in and around Frost Giant's daughter, but not just readapt the story in the same way? And we kind of stumbled across a couple of these elements that I felt like we could really dig a little deeper and hopefully do something a bit surprising with the material. And thankfully the fandom has responded, and it's working, you know. And so Doug gets to draw the cool environment and where he wants to be, and I get to explore something about the character I had done. It feels pretty magical.
Something that Doug likes to do is he likes to play.
Oh man, he's so good.
When he's given big canvas to play,
yeah,
he likes to do it.
He's such a joy to work with too.
Yeah. And like I said, you came very close with the Tripwire Awards against something who doesn't seem to sleep.
Oh, Tom?
That boy just is. I don't know.
I love Tom's work.
I don't know what he's on.
Yeah.
He's whoever's keeping him awake 24 hours to write all of this. He's incredible.
It's so good.
For yourself, I mean, it seems you are Conan.
I'm Conan focused. I've got some other projects.
That's the point.
Yeah.
What's next time?
So I've been doing a bunch of writing work for Dungeons & Dragons. I did the comics, but then I do other work as well. We have a series of books called the Young Adventurers Guides to bring new people into D&D, and those have been a really rich and enjoyable project because I started playing D&D when I was 8 years old, and so now
I'm an AD&D guy.
Yeah, me too. And so to meet people now who are my age when I started, or 8 or 10 or 12 years old, and it's all new to them, and they're finding their way in thanks to the books that I'm doing. I mean, that's a great feeling.
D&D players are finding their way in through back doors.
Everywhere, it's great.
Lots of different ways, and then always coming back to the source.
Yeah, no, but it's, between Critical Role and Stranger Things and Baldur's Gate.
This is VR. And Demio is a big game.
Sure.
On this
VR
landscape.
Yep.
But people are coming back to the...
Absolutely. Well, and they realize that what makes it special is spending time with your friends and building things together. And that we don't know where that story is going to go, but all of us are going to contribute. That's what makes D&D special. And I wouldn't be a writer without it. So, yeah, big time. It unlocked like a level of wanting to make things and that feedback loop of people's excitement to interact around what we made.
What was it?
Oh, my first character was a moronic dwarf, which is why there's a moronic dwarf in Skull Kickers, my first creator-owned fantasy book. And then from there, that character died moronically as he lived. And so then I wanted to make a genuinely heroic character. I made a paladin, and I ran around for a while with that character. Also, rangers and thieves, and I love the martial classes. They're all super fun. Yeah.
It's been great talking to you.
Absolute pleasure.
I hope you have an amazing show. What I like about where they put you is it's right across the writer's block as well.
Yeah,
so
it's fun.
A real sense of the art and creativity behind you, but then the literary. You are top.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been fun.
Enjoy the rest of it.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
All the best.